ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. The second class is always the best because the first one is just an introduction and a background. Now we really get into the thick of what Panchadashi even is. So let's start off chanting the Mangala Charanam to begin with. Namah Shri Shankarananda Gurupadambujanmane Savila Samahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. And today we come to the second shloka. Tatpadamburuhadvandva Seva Nirmala Chetasam Sukhabodhaya Tattvasya Vivekoyam Vidhiyate. Vivekoyam Vidhiyate. Why are we even studying this text? It's about inquiry. Understanding that which is not obvious. Exploring those ideas that we really need to unpack for them to make sense. And most importantly, how can we assimilate these ideas for ourselves? Because a study can be done in an academic way, simply where I'm amassing information to know things just for the sake of being able to express them. And that's not what Vedanta is about. Here, it's truly about what can I do with this knowledge to help me on my spiritual journey. That has to be my mentality with every word, every verse, every text, every set of texts that I study. Or else it's so easy to fall into the trap of simply assimilating knowledge, simply going through the motions and saying that I get some kind of intellectual challenge from this and that's fun. I get some kind of placebo of I feel good, that, oh, I'm also going through satsang. But what am I getting at the end? And if I can't make that clear for myself, then the very purpose of what I'm studying completely falls away. So always I have to keep that in mind. That is this contributing to my spiritual journey for that moksha? In what way does this knowledge help me? And one funny thing we find here is Nirmala Chetasam. This is for pure minds. Now, that doesn't mean that if we're impure in our minds and we have likes and dislikes, that this knowledge is not for us. That's not what that means. It simply means that this knowledge gives me that pure mind. So let me go at that as thoroughly as I can. Sukhabodhaya. Sukhabodhaya, this is for easy understanding. Now, as we go into the thick of Panchadashi, that'll be laughable, because there's so much logic involved and so much mental gymnastics that we have to do. But what the Acharya is pointing at here is that this knowledge is so esoteric. The mantras of the Upanishads and the Veda can seem so cryptic at times. Thank God for the Purva Acharyas who have put this in a format. This is easy to understand. Look at how many layers we're studying from right now. First layer is that Upanishadic knowledge has been put into a palatable shloka form by Sri Vidyaranya Swamiji, broken up into chapters that have different themes in this text. That Advaitic knowledge has been packaged in an easy way to understand that way. On top of that, one more layer that we have is Pujya Guruji's commentary in the English language, setting us up step by step every single shloka. So we're several layers deep when it comes to the ease that we have, and that is something you and I are very lucky to have in our lives. That's the ease at which we do this. And again, a connection back to the Mangala Charanam. Tat padam puruha dvandva. That to those pair of the lotus feet of the Guru is where this is offered, and that is where we derive this knowledge. Seva, through service. Now, if we look at Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna gives the most beautiful statement. If we were to ask the question, what is the greatest seva we can do for the Guru? Bhagavan Krishna doesn't say it's about giving them flowers or giving them objects or riches or things like this. The way we show our gratitude to the Guru is Pariprashnena Sevaya. The greatest seva is to ask as many questions as possible. Because there is nothing that a Guru loves more than to give this knowledge. And the way this knowledge transfer happens is by asking questions and humbly receiving those answers. So Guru Seva is completely in the form of burning for this knowledge. And that's the greatest thing we can do. So now, let's go to it then. One thing that we have to impress upon ourselves early on in this text is that when it comes to Vedantic unfoldment and spiritual growth, it will always be uncomfortable. Growth has to be uncomfortable. The physical level, when a child is in their early preteen years and those growth spurts happen, you get shin splints, your arms hurt. It's a very painful process at times, medically also. Now, the same is true for the mind. If I'm doing things according to my likes and dislikes, and the world seems to bend to my will, I am totally happy. There is no pain. There also is no growth. Growth only comes when there is some kind of change going on in my psyche, a different way of thinking, new ways of looking at things, innovating the way my actions are, altering the way my behavior is. All of this is uncomfortable. The fact that I cannot go after what I like and I must curtail and have self-control, that's not fun. But at the end of the day, with all the prescriptions given, do I trust the process laid out by Vedanta? Now, how does trust in a process come about? At one layer, we can say, is it verified by others? Then I'll go by this process. Someone else has had an illness that I've had. If they've gone through that regimen medically, maybe not Tylenol nowadays, but if they've gone through that regimen medically, then that's something I will trust even more, because someone's been through that. Now, you look at validation for this Vedantic path, that has been validated time and again by our Guru Shishya Parampara. That if these sadhanas are taken up wholeheartedly, if this knowledge is understood with that humility of assimilating that into my life, there is no other outcome but attaining this moksha. That's the loud declaration of every guru in our Guru Shishya Parampara. From all over Bharatavarsha, from various different sects that study this knowledge, they've all said this. Now, another way of trusting this process comes down to, do I understand the intention behind it? When I'm a child, and, when you're in the grocery line, you're with your parents at Walmart or Target or somewhere. Now, these marketing geniuses are quite smart in what they do. They'll have, candies, candy bars, and all these things, and they're not high up on the shelf for the adults to look at. They put them at the eye level of the kids. So the parent may even miss them, but then the kid sees it very clearly and says, "Oh, I want this so bad." And then they cry completely, and the parent has no choice but to buy that candy for the kid. Where that process right there is something everyone has to go through. But then at a certain point, parents stand up for themselves and they say, "No. You will not get a candy today. I did that for you last time. That was the last time it's going to happen. I'm not doing this today." Now the kid feels terrible. They may throw a tantrum, all of this, that you're withholding love from me, you're withholding this, that, everything. At the end of the day, we would always side with the parent, that the parent knows what they're doing. The kid doesn't trust the process because they don't understand. They just think that the parent is withholding something and is being arcane. That's not the case. You look at this process that we have to go through, spiritual unfoldment. Whether it's Srimad Bhagavad Gita that starts out by saying I have to have sense control and then goes from there. Whether it comes to other texts that tell me that I must desist from doing action that is not conducive for me. Whether it's other texts that say daily disciplines like Nitya Karma. Sadhana Panchakam starts with Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam. Always study the Veda daily. Anushtana, do it daily as well. Nitya Karmas, that must be done. We see these as overly rigid, and we say that organized religion doesn't have the answers because it just wants to control me. That may be true for some religions, but not Sanatana Dharma. In Sanatana Dharma, these restrictions on my behavior are placed because if I am to understand this knowledge, I need a sound body and a clean mind, a calm intellect. All of this is needed. This happens through daily disciplines. This only happens through understanding how to tame this mind. That's why all these processes are given. So whether it's a sadhana process that restricts me from doing what I want, or a discipline that puts me into a routine of study, prayer, and worship, if I do not trust the process, there is no growth. And that's something right off the bat, I bring this up because a text like Panchadashi will expect me to have that trust in the process. We'll see with this next shloka, we hit the ground running with what the logic is. The legwork of believing that I need this daily discipline, that's something I need to cultivate, or else this knowledge will leave me behind. I'll go through an entire text, I'll intellectually understand everything, but it will not make a dent in my heart because I haven't done that legwork before of making sure this mind is calm and disciplined. Now going further, we come to the third shloka right here. Shabdasparshadayo vedyaha Vaichitriyajagare prathak Tato vibhakta tatsamvita Aikarupyanna bhidyate. Here's something really interesting to see. The objects of knowledge. If we were to say objects of knowledge, you and I would think objects of knowledge are the materials and forms around me. It's the words that I read that make sense to me. The words that I hear that I can make something intellectual out of. The happenings around me that I see. Interactions that I can learn from. These are objects of knowledge. However, this shloka simplifies that concept so easily. Where if we were to go on naming objects of knowledge, we can come up with an infinite number of different things. But here, objects of knowledge are what I ascertain simply with my five senses. Sound is an object of knowledge. Touch, smell, taste. All five of what I ascertain with my senses, those are the objects. That simplifies it so much in that we're not bogged down by what exactly the stimuli is, because that's not what's important. The very fact that I do see, that I do taste, that I do touch, that means very clearly those are objects. That simplifies our understanding a lot here. Now, these are all perceived in the waking state, and they're all different. A sound is different from a taste, which is different from a touch, which is different from what I see. These all have their own areas. There's never a time when someone says, hey, is it sunny outside? Instead of opening the blinds and looking at the window, I close my eyes, turn towards the window, and yes, I think it is sunny outside today. That never happens. Each of these sense organs have their specific field in which they ascertain knowledge. But they're peculiar in their own way, meaning each is different in what it owns up. However, at the end of the day, in the waking state, there is only that one consciousness illuminating all of these. Now, for those of you that have been studying Vedanta for a while, you may say, hey, yeah, that makes sense. It's all the same consciousness that illuminates everything. But think about it as a beginner. If all five of these functionalities are so different, how can they be governed by only one witness or one consciousness? That's a game changer right there. Shouldn't it be that for my sense of sight, there is one consciousness, or looking over that, illuminating that? For sense of taste, illuminates this. Because look at any other kind of example where there is illumination of an object. Whether it's my toaster. No one uses a toaster, what am I saying? Whether it's my air fryer. Whether it's my lamp. All of these things plug in. But then the thing is, they all derive their power from that same electricity that courses through. It may be that they have their various individual plug points serving their individual functions, but it's that same electricity right there. That's the best way to see it. That despite these 5 objects, again, what I own up through any of these senses, are so varied and different because the medium that they come through, they function because of simply one consciousness. This is the beauty of that waking world. Where the entire point of the shloka right off the bat is to show, despite diversity that we find in the world, we're not focusing on the world in this chapter of Panchadashi. We're focusing on ourselves and how we see the world. All of that can be boiled down to simply 5 objects, and those 5 objects have one consciousness. So already we see the aim of this text is to go inward. We see this so often, don't we? Whether it's Puja Gurudev's commentary and essays, and everywhere, look inward, look inward. That is the spiritual journey. What does look inward even mean? That's fully encapsulated in this one shloka, where all the diversity of the world and plurality with its cause and effect, all of that we could get distracted by so easily. Instead, we're taught here, let go of those externalities, focus and hone in on what is the knowledge transfer happening for me when I own things up. Let that serve as an example to go to the peculiarities of these 5 objects. From there, let's go to there's one consciousness illuminating and governing everything. That's our very starting point right here. And now we come to shloka number 4 that extends this line of thinking, now taking us from the waking state, the dream state. This is where things get a bit more hairy. Tatha svapne travedyam tu na sthiram jagare sthiram tadbhedos tastayo samvit ekarupa na bhidyate. Now, what's one objection that we find right here? That okay, you can say in the waking state, there is one consciousness that pervades. In the dream state here, how can it be one consciousness pervading all? Because what I perceive is completely transient. Things are changing all the time. That which I consistently see in the waking state day after day, seldom do I have the same dream night after night. How can it be? There's got to be some difference right there. Let's analyze this for a second. What we find in the dream world is a projection of what we see in the waking. As convoluted as it may seem, as nonsensical as it may seem, as warped as they are, dreams are nothing but a reflection of what is in waking. Where you can spend a day focusing on different things. Like the other day, I was just really tired, so I watched a movie during the day. Movie was about a baseball team going through the playoffs and fighting each other, and then they come together at the end of the day. Then taking a walk outside, I saw one of the funniest looking dogs ever. Someone was walking their dog. Right, I understand grooming of the dog, but sometimes with the poodle, it'll look like the dog's wearing a hat and then like a bulbous tail, and then it looks fluffy. I feel bad for the dog to look like that. I'm pretty sure when other dogs walk by, they're bullying that dog and making fun of it. We don't know it because we don't understand their language, but this dog is definitely like, hey, you look so weird. They're probably saying that to each other. All right? And like parents that buy their kids dorky clothes, the owner of this dog gives them this weird haircut and everything. So I went to bed. and I had a weird dream. That these badly groomed or well groomed, whatever you want to say, these dogs were playing a baseball game, was what my dream was. What was there in the waking state, which made sense, that was completely warped in this dream state. That's all it is. So I know, and I'm not trying to ridicule anyone, but I understand we spend so much time looking into dream journals and what does my dream mean, this and that. All my dream means is there's stuff happening in the waking that I'm thinking about that's making its way into my subconscious, and that's what expresses in those dreams. That's all it is. It's fun to analyze certain aspects and see what things mean and everything, but it's inconsequential. Just whatever's in waking, mirrored in a warped way in dream. That's all we're seeing right there. Now, what are some differences, misconceptions we have to break? One idea is that when I have dreams, that's completely in the mind. There can be memories of things that happened in the past, perhaps premonition on things that I'm thinking about a lot. Waking, however, depends on the world. Therefore, waking is real, the dreams aren't real. We can say that, can't we? Where's the flaw in that logic right there? Doesn't waking also depend on the mind? What I see is based on what my perspective is. What I see as reality, what I see as an experience, that's based completely on my mind. There's a reason why each of us have our own favorite movies. Because of the way my mind is, I take something as interesting or boring or fun or malicious. I take things a different way. And based on my limited perspective, not just on my likes and dislikes, but my limited perception of an event or a moment, my idea of what that is changes completely. I give this example sometimes. In our Balviar here in Dallas, every week, we have one class on stage that sings the bhajans. There's one student that talks about what we've done in class since the last time we've presented. It's a way for the students to really connect with the congregation every single weekend. I think we're one of the few centers that do something like that. This was a few years ago when I first came here as a brahmachari, serving in our Frisco center. There's a video that went around amongst parents. In the video, there's a kid, 4th grader, kind of struggling to talk about what we do in class. He was nervous. He was mumbling, stuttering, stumbling through it. On the edge of the frame, as he's stuttering, you see Brahmachari Hari Chaitanya laughing. So, at first glance, looks like Brahmachari's a jerk. This kid's struggling to read something, and here I am laughing. So someone sent it to me, be like, dude, this does not look good for you. And I looked at it, and I'm like, wait, I never laugh at kids to their face. I never laugh at kids to their face. That can't be, like, I don't understand how that looks like that. Then I thought back, man, why is that happening? Now, this is the honest to God truth of what was happening. We have a rule on discipline where if you're late to the session, you have to sit outside till announcements are over and then you come in. Okay? So, when the assembly's going on, every now and then, some little kids will try to sneak into the hall. And we have our valiant warriors, volunteers, who stand at the door, trying to make sure they don't break that rule and come in. So at that exact moment where this kid is reading what we do in class, there was a child try to run into the room, and like a soccer goalie, our volunteers are trying to stop them. And these kids are like a third of their size, and our volunteers may be out of shape. So it's hard for them to do this. Seeing the absurdity of that moment, that made me chuckle and I was laughing. But you wouldn't have been able to tell that because the angle of the camera didn't take that into account, of course. My point being, waking in that moment depends on the mind of what we're seeing from our limited perception. And so it's a warped view. Just like, wait for it, a dream. So how can we give any more reality to waking over dream then? They are the same in that they're both unreal, both ordained by that one consciousness. Then one other argument you can come up with. Objects are stable, sthira, like we saw in the shloka, in the waking state. In a dream, I went to bed, and in my dream, I looked in the mirror, and Hariji had a full head of hair in that dream. long locks that I could rub and comb and everything. The next night I have a dream, I have a mohawk in that dream. The sides are completely shaved. It's a 90s thing for those of you that don't know. The sides are completely shaved. In the middle, you have attractive hair that's standing up. The next night in my dream, I look in the mirror in that dream, and I've dyed my hair blonde. All of these are fleeting and changing. However, in the waking state, which is stable, I'm bald every single day in the waking state for those 3 days. Therefore, the waking state is more real than that dream state. However, if we look at the Vedantic definition of what is real and unreal, it's about permanency. And if there's change that takes place ever, that cannot be seen as real, because anything that undergoes change has parts to it. Anything that has parts to it is subject to kshaya or nasha, meaning destruction at some point. Meaning even in those 3 days, the hair has grown. There has been change. So perceptively, at a basic level, yes, objects may seem stable. They do undergo change even in that waking state. Therefore, the waking state is unreal. Not any more reality we can lend it than we do to a dream. Another argument here. In a dream, there is no logic associated with it. I can dream one thing one day that completely changes the next day. Waking, however, has some kind of continuity to it. There are things that occur. There's a building of that later on. How do you make curd? You boil milk, let it cool down for a bit, get the culture of a little bit of curd from before, put it in, let it incubate overnight, and then when you uncover it the next day, all of it's turned into curd. There is a continuity that when you were in the waking state at one point, you did something, that action led to a result, and the next time you're in the waking state, you see that result happen. Tell me that can happen for a dream. That in my dream tonight, when I slept, for about 4 hours during that dream, I was running a marathon. I go to sleep the next night, I finish the marathon. Dreams don't work that way. You don't leave off where you were before, like unpausing a Netflix show and then you go on to the next. That's not how a dream works. Therefore, since waking has that continuity, it's more real than a dream. The logical fallacy here is I perceive waking as having continuity, but again, just because I don't see things the same way in the dream does not make it any more unreal than what waking is, simply because change is not indicative of any kind of realness associated with anything. What I see as continuity is still simply change that's going on. A change that makes logical sense to me, no doubt, yeah. Understood, accepted. That's still change, however. All this to say what? What is the culmination of this entire argument? Negation is negation. The waking world stultifies or negates the dream world. Because I wake up from a dream being chased by a tiger. I wake up all sweating and almost in tears. I check 10 toes, 10 fingers. I'm good to go. I chuckle about what happened in the dream because the waking state negated what happened in the dream. Therefore, dream is false. Easy. Doesn't the dream state negate waking as well, however? Oh, but the dream is unreal because, it's just a figment. Does not matter. If the dream state negates the waking state just as much as waking negates dream, both of them are verily unreal. That's the logic that we come to in Vedanta. And that consciousness governing both states is that one consciousness, undivided, one and only reality. Buddy Bhai, why go through all this stuff, man? All these slides about in a waking state is this, dream is this, what's the point of it? The point of it is to show consciousness does not differentiate in any way. In any state that I find myself in, this consciousness is one. And in our analysis, the beautiful analysis that we find here of the Avasthatraya, negation is what is king here. No more logic than that. Waking negating dream, we all know. Dream negates waking. That's something we have to own up at this point. Moving forward, if we saw waking, we saw dream, naturally, we have to come to deep sleep at this point. Shloka number 5. Suptothitasya saushupta tamo bodho bhavet smritihi saachava buddha vishaya avabuddham tattada tamaha. Deep sleep is that state of dreamless sleep. You can go technically about REM cycles, this and that. I didn't study much in school, so I don't know what that means. All I know is Vedanta tells me there's 3 states of existence. That's waking, dream, and deep sleep. This deep sleep is also worthy of our study. While the waking and the dream state, we can pinpoint specific moments that we've gone through, remnants of these states that stay in our memory, in our psyche. Deep sleep is a whole other animal. We cannot remember anything that happens in this deep sleep. At the most, what I can remember is I slept well and I slept through everything. That's it. Now, we often give the moniker of consciousness, we connect that to knowledge. Consciousness and knowledge go together. What is the knowledge taking place in the deep sleep state? Because the argument we're trying to make here, this whole day today, is saying that the waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state, there is that one consciousness pervading all 3 states. That's what we're trying to accomplish right here. So far, we've understood that for waking. We've gone through it for dream as well. For deep sleep, however, I cannot use the evidence of there was this knowledge of this happening or that happening, therefore deep sleep has that consciousness. I do not have access to this body, no access to this mind. How can I say there's evidence to point at there was some consciousness or something going on there? The very fact that I can say I don't know what happened in deep sleep, that is evidence that that consciousness is there. Because who said knowledge only means I know? That's a very rudimentary understanding. Vedanta says that illumination that tells me whether I know or don't know, that is that consciousness. So me saying I'm ignorant of something, that is evidence that that consciousness is present right there illuminating. Because even that ability to say I don't know is only because of that consciousness. We had a rule when I was in 6th grade history class. Our teacher banned the answer of I don't know. Because we wouldn't read the book, right? She asks a question, we'd say, I don't know, and she'd be like, you can't say that. You have to come up with something at least. Vedanta tells me that when it comes to understanding consciousness, proving its existence, I don't know is even a good answer. That proves that that consciousness is present and functioning. Because its role merely is to illuminate. How can that thought of I don't know be illuminated if not for that consciousness? You see the beauty of the Vedantic thinking right here? In this entire Avasthatraya discussion that we're looking at each stage, so many doubts are answered. So many objections are wiped away. Whether it comes to the reality or unreality of these states, negating all 3 as saying that they're not that ultimate reality. That's one thing it accomplishes. Second thing is, for each of these states, we recognize clearly how that one consciousness pervades that state, even when there is no remembrance, like in the previous 2 states. Very amazing to see right here. Now, going even further, what do we find? This sets us up for the next set to look at. Sabodho vishayat bhinnaha न बोधात् स्वप्नबोधवत् एवं स्थानत्रयेऽप्येक्या संवित् तद्वद्दिनान्तरे. Looking at what consciousness is in this deep sleep state, that ignorance is indicative that there is consciousness. So, what's the conclusion that we come to right here? In all three states of being, waking, dream, and deep sleep, this is one homogeneous consciousness pervading all three states. Now, I said that several times in several different ways, not simply to pass the time, but because that's the main point we want to come to. Now comes the most important part. What is the implication of this idea? Puja Gurudev gives a very beautiful exposition elsewhere saying that there's a difference between idea and attitude. For example, when it comes to selfless service, the idea of selfless service and why important is one thing. Putting that into practice is quite something else. What we can find very clearly here is we get bogged down by the diversity of the world. So many different things going on that we get caught up in. Whether it's turmoil that's happening in the world today, whether it's within family or with loved ones, different discord and conflict or anxieties that we have, whether it's my own mental machinations, not fully understanding why my mind reacts the way it does and rebelling against it at times, not feeling it's optimal, all of these differences are there for us. However, what's important to see is in this journey that I go through as a sadhaka, even though I try to label things as good or bad or awful or great, everything is ordained by that one consciousness. Meaning what? Whether I engage in things and love them in the world, whether I'm averse to things and stay away from them, these are all building impressions in my mind. Impressions that play out in this waking state and dream state, which I give so much importance to. At the end of the day, all they do is compound vasanas that I have. That is their one effect. Right off the bat, it's simplified for us that there are only 5 objects that are owned up in the world. Those objects are not things that are perceived through sound and sight. They are sound and sight and everything. Those are objects. Meaning the diversity and plurality of the world is completely boiled down. Turning inward means stopping the world at that point, looking inward from that point onwards. And when that's done, then we go through a framework that only focuses on my states of being. Waking, dream, deep sleep. The next stage is to nullify and negate all of those states as impermanent, unreal. What is the definition of real in Vedanta? If we look at Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 16th shloka, Bhagavan Krishna clearly says there, that which is real is present in all 3 periods of time, past, present, and future. That is how we define real. Anything else that exists, even for a moment or what we see as a long time across centuries, that is still bound between the parameters of time, therefore it cannot be real. If something is not real, it does not independently exist. If something does not independently exist, that cannot be my identity. Going by that logic, this body, made up of all its parts and functionalities, impermanent, that is not what I am. This mind, made up of emotions and just lightning quick, that is also impermanent, that's not me. Intellect, which cognizes what is owned up as these 5 objects, that also is impermanent, fleeting, changing, has parts to it. Therefore, that is not me. My identity, realizing which I attain that liberation, Isn't it scary that none of the states that I'm in, none of the equipment I interact with, none of that's me? It has to be something much deeper. The entire quest of Vedanta is to understand what that subtler, deeper entity is, the only one reality. In today's exploration, then, I know we went through 5 or 6 shlokas, but they're all one theme that fits. This first foray of exploration goes into looking inward for these 3 states and ascertaining and completely understanding none of these 3 states is real because they negate each other. It's immaterial that in waking state things still are seemingly more permanent, does not matter. If dream state negates what's in the waking state and is different from it, one state negates the other, just like waking negates dream, unreal. And we find that in all 3 states of being, that one consciousness pervades. I still don't think that one consciousness pervades. Tune in next week then. That's when we go through why nothing but this one consciousness pervades through everything. So with that, thank you so much for your time this morning. Happy Navaratri to you and your families. Hopefully you have a blissful, spiritual week of celebrations still coming up. And we'll see you next week. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Hari Om